everybody, and welcome to the Seafood Matters. Thank you for joining us again. For commercial fishermen, coatings aren't cosmetic. They're about corrosion, control, safety, deck safety, structural protection, and ultimately avoiding costly shipyard time. A working vessel doesn't sit polished in a marina. It's exposed to salt, abrasion, oil, freezing temperatures, and constant impact. Today, I'm speaking with Mark Edwards and Simon Delarue from Assured Marine. They describe their products as high-performance marine coatings engineered to last. But what does that mean for a 20-year-old steel trawler working hard seasons in the northern waters? That's what we're just about to find out. Welcome to Seafood Matters. Hi, Mark and Simon, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. So we thought, Jim, maybe we'd introduce ourselves to you and your listeners. My name's Mark Edwards. I'm a chemist. I don't know how many chemists you get on the show. I think I might be the first. My background's in synthetic chemistry, and I've worked on all sorts of things from consumer products to pesticides. But the thing I'm passionate about is the marine world. I am a boat owner. And the story we're going to tell you today is about how we think we can make the marine environment better, but give real benefits for the working people, fishermen, in terms of performance of their vessels and the boats. And I'll hand over to Simon.
Thank you, Mark. It's always difficult when I'm introducing myself alongside Mark because he's got more PhDs than I do. And I often feel intellectually inferior. However, we all have our areas of expertise, and mine, effectively, I've worked in small businesses and startups for my career, but more recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, have been focusing on those in the marine world and those that are related to mitigating impact on the environment. Now, I really quite dislike terms like sustainability and net zero because I think there are very negative associations with them. But I'll come on to explain that later. But I live on Guernsey in the Channel Islands. My family has a long history with shipping. My ancestors built the boats that opened up the trade routes to Costa Rica that William LaLasha sailed. And we go back quite a long way in shipbuilding on that side. But I teamed up with Mark and we founded Assured Marine.
That's fantastic.
And I should say that Simon and I have a common link because my mother's from Guernsey and I've spent a lot of time on the island. And my family also goes back quite a long way in the Channel Islands. So I think it was a natural partnership for us. And what we can do today is tell you a bit about the story of the journey we've been on together.
Please do.
So, Jim, if I go back 5 years, COVID had arrived in the UK. I've been working for around 25 years for large multinational companies, and I formed my own business. And I had a bit of time on my hands because consulting was quite quiet during the COVID period. And I was in Southampton working on my boat, and I looked at what people were using on their boats, and I was really quite shocked because the chemicals I saw were very similar to the chemicals that I used to make for pesticides for ICI. And one of the things I'd done over my later career was try to work with nature to control things like bacteria and viruses, to stop disease. But a lot of that work was in oral care. And the funny thing about your mouth is it's very similar to the sea because we all came out of the sea. So a lot of the technologies that we develop for oral products and other things are really interesting when you look at the marine environment. And one of the areas I'd done a lot of work on was changing surfaces so bacteria and viruses didn't attach. And I looked at what was being used in marine, and most of those products were killing things. And that technology really, for chemists, relates back to maybe the 50s, the 60s, and even the 70s. But in healthcare, people have moved away from killing things, and they'd realized that by changing surfaces, you could work with nature to have much better benefits. And that was the beginning of a really exciting area of chemistry called ultra thin polymeric films, which is what we use. So that was the beginning of the journey. And like all inventors, I started in my kitchen and I made some formulas and I tested them on panels in Southampton. And I tested them on different materials. And then I found that the formulas that we had evolved, and then we had one that worked really well. And that's the one we're going to talk about today. And it started with wanting to prevent fouling. But what we've realized, and we'll take you through the story of this, is there's far more important benefits for these coatings than just preventing fouling, because actually they can, at the end of the day, save money for people like fishermen. And that's what we'll tell you about. So that's the beginning of the story. It started with a spark on a dockside in a marina in Southampton.
That's quite fascinating, and I find because the thing that makes it, I think, special is you're not taking risks, undue risks or chances, because you're talking about a thing that we're talking about fishing people. Every fisherman I ever speak to, they don't work against nature, they work with it. And that's exactly what you're talking about doing. So I think that's a good place a good, stable, steady place as a springboard, a good base, a good foundation.
No, I think you're right, Jim, because I think certainly in healthcare, what people have realized is working with the body is far better. So in oral care, if we went back to the 1970s, people talked about killing 99.9% of bacteria. And then people that really know the mouth, people like dentists, realized this was a really bad idea. And now most of the products we use work with your mouth. They try and promote good bacteria and prevent bad bacteria, and they try and work with the body. And it just works much better because at the end of the day, we want our teeth to last forever. And in a similar way, for boats and trawlers, we want to work with nature because that's going to be better for the boat owner, but also the fish stocks and and shellfish in particular.
The only other thing I thought you might pull me up and say it was on the wrong track, but you're talking about doing all the different, getting the different things and then taking it to tests with panels. Do I do I read into that you didn't want to do it yourself?
No. So the panels are physical panels. Sorry, Jim. So they're
I jest,
literally
I jest,
literally
I
boards.
jest.
um, but I think it's like everything in science. You have to put your ideas together. You have to make a formula, and you have to see if it works. And sometimes it doesn't. Um, in this case, it works really well. But we have made a lot of changes. The one thing I would say is that sometimes when you talk to people, especially in academia, in universities, that kind of thing, they can try and make things from scratch that mimic nature, and that can take a very long time. And Simon and I haven't taken that approach. What we've done is we've taken materials that have already been made at large scale by large companies that have very good safety data, and they'll have been developed for different things like implants in the body or contact lenses, all sorts of things. And we've used those in our formulas in a very specific way to give the benefit. So we're taking things that we know work and putting together in a really unique way to give a product that is very different to maybe the traditional paints that you see in the marine world.
If you excuse my ignorance on the subject, Where do you see the likeness between the mouth and the sea? Because the only thing only likeness I can give is my wife. It was a nurse all her life. Anytime I would say I was feeling this, or else could be anything, and I would say, I wonder what I should do. She said,
Well,
swell it out with salt water.
it comes back
Get a
to
salt water mouthwash.
yeah. Well, it comes back to we came from the sea. All the organisms came from the sea, and when you look at things like what's in saliva, the proteins, the makeup, there are a lot of similarities. And the big
Wow.
thing in the mouth that's similar is stuff grows very quickly. You get things growing in the mouth very, very quickly. That's why you have to brush twice a day.
Uh-huh.
And in the sea, it's the same. And the reason for that is bacteria and larger organisms are really good at colonizing surfaces. They really want to do that. So the similarity is there's a lot of stuff that wants to grow in your mouth, and if it gets out of control, it's very bad news. And it's the same with the sea. Things grow very quickly, as we know, and when it gets out of control, well, in the commercial sense, it's very expensive. So really the aim is the same. It's to control in a helpful way the things that are growing there.
Yeah, yeah. And are you the same background, Simon?
No, my career in academia was much shorter and unrelated. But I met Mark it was probably just over 3 years ago now, and since then we have iterated a lot. We've looked at different routes of bringing this product into the market. Now, originally, it was the focus on the recreational marine world and boat hulls. And because when you stumble across a product like this, it seems like the obvious place to go to because there's a huge amount of impact, there's a large surface area, ultimately you could have more volume. However, there are many challenges with that particular market. The leisure market can be very fussy, less adaptable to change. The reasons why they do things are not necessarily tied to the financial outcome of doing it. If you have spent £200,000 on a motorboat, you're not going to care so much about if your boat moves through the water more efficiently and saves you 300 quid at the end of the year on fuel for the few trips that you take in it. So the decision framework that a leisure boat owner goes through is completely different from one that a commercial owner goes through. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the earlier work that Mark had done was on the effects of the coating on a hull passing through the water. Now, the study itself was with an electric vessel, and coating the entire hull of the boat delivered a 5% saving in a reduction in required energy to go at the same speed. What we then did was coat the propeller, and then that gave another 5% saving in energy. So simply by coating a propeller, you got the same benefit as coating the entire hull of the vessel. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Less product, time, and the barrier to entry of coating an entire hull is quite high. And the reason why it's high is because the market is used to killing things, killing absolutely everything on the hull of a boat, slow release poison. And so they struggle to see with a coating which, if you're sat in a marina stationary for 8 weeks at a time, you might get a little bit of algae, but you can wipe it off with a sponge. But that doesn't work for a leisure user. They're just used to copper coat or anti-foul or whatever it may be. But the analogy we like to give with from the prop side is it's like inflating the tires on a car. By doing that, you can make exactly the same saving for your vessel. Now, it's a concept that we're all very familiar with driving cars. You pump the tires up, you keep them inflated, you save fuel. Yet what we've found is that the propeller often seems to be the most neglected part of the vessel when considering things like cost and damage or propulsion or speed. A lot of attention is given to the hull, yet the propeller is the thing that is actually delivering the power from the engine into forward motion.
And Simon referenced, the work that was done there was part of a government grant, actually, part of Innovate UK, who are fantastic. And it was working on a fantastic electric boat. And the objective was not to add more batteries to the electric boat, but to allow it to go further. So the efficiency for the electric boat was to increase the range. But equally, for a fishing boat, if you increase the efficiency, then you can save fuel. And that's, we'll come on to why we think that's a good idea. But there was another partner that we worked with before that we really should mention. That's Plymouth University. They've been really very helpful to the work that we've done. And we used their flow tanks to understand what was happening when we coated the surface. And so we put these different shapes in, and we tested them, and we had some fantastic students who've done very well, actually, in their theses. And what we found was that the flow across the surface of the coated shapes was much smoother. So there was less turbulent flow. And less turbulent flow means you're more efficient. There's less power wasted. And this is how we think we are improving the propeller. We're basically enabling the propeller. So when we say we improve the propeller, we say the uncoated propeller has a performance level, and then we make it 5% better than the clean, new, or freshly finished propeller. That's very unusual. And that's what we're excited about on this coating, because that's a saving.
I find it staggering. I think it's you, Simon, that mentioned it just a minute ago, or that it gets to the stage where I'm sorry, I just can't get my head around this, how it's more important to have the propeller coated than the hull. And when you think how the percentage of a boat, how much of it is hull and how much it is propeller, I think that's a fascinating.
Often these things are, with anything in life, staring us in the face, and it takes a fresh perspective. And Mark's background as a chemist has brought a completely different view to the challenge and the problem that the fishing industry faces. Because typically, and to be fair, this goes for the majority of marine solutions, they're mechanical in their nature. How can we mechanically change things? How can we physically design this in a different way? What shape can we use? Whereas what Mark has developed and what we're developing is changing the chemistry on the surface of the prop. Now, the term that all your listeners will be familiar with is cavitation. And what we're suspecting is that this is reducing the micro cavitation that you may see on the prop, which improves the ability for the propeller to bite in the water and push that water more, rather than having it spinning and wasting energy. You're actually getting that more bite to it. And from that perspective, having a chemical bond to the surface is much stronger than having a painted bond, a mechanical bond to the surface, which means that, as Mark can speak to you better, it really helps with that annual service life for the products and the product's resilience. So, Mark, do you want to just touch on that?
So I think that's right. So, we chemically bind it. There's a primer, and then there's two top coats. And what we're doing is we're creating layers on the surface that give the benefit that we're looking for in terms of the chemistry. And I think what's really neat about it is it does copy things like blood cells. So when you look at a blood cell, it moves through your veins very efficiently. That's because of the coating. And it shows, to Simon's point, that chemistry can dramatically change how something performs in air or in fluids, and that's what we're seeing here. So really, what we're doing is we're trying to provide a chemical solution. And I know in the marine world, there's a lot of really elegant engineering solutions. I've been to a lot of presentations, and I'm always amazed at the engineering that goes on. But I think on the chemical side, less has been done, and I think that's the exciting opportunity here, is that we can make things better, improve things, just by using some chemistry we have already.
Yeah. I mean, you've almost answered pretty much the first question I was going to ask you, and I was going to say my listeners aren't polishing yachts, they're running working boats. And I was going to say, why should a commercial skipper care about your coatings? But I think you've already said it.
Well, Jim, I think I'm going to refer back to your podcast that you did with Wendy regarding the industry and its approach towards net zero. And the reason why I'm going to refer to that is because the very last thing that Mark or I will ever talk about is saving the environment in the context of this product. And the reason is, and I refer back to my statements on sustainability and net zero, is because when I say sustainability to someone, you'll often think of either somebody gluing themselves to a road, or it's a bit rubbish and costs more than the other product. Because historically, that's what sustainability has been. But good quality sustainability has to be economically sustainable. And so I am not coming here telling your listeners to save the environment. I'm coming here to say to your listeners, the best financial decision you will make for your vessel is putting this coating on and saving fuel, because fuel savings go straight on the bottom line. And how can that be done? Well, first off, the one thing we should say about this kind of coating is it's relatively incredibly easy to apply. Any boatyard around the UK, or anyone that has even a remotely decent level of experience in paints or coatings, would be able to apply it. It is incredibly thin. So it's about the thickness of a human hair, 16 to 32 microns. So it's almost invisible to the naked eye. Of course, it will. You can see it once it's on. But as soon as that is coated and that vessel is about to move away from the dock, as soon as you engage the engine, for any well-seasoned boat owner and operator, they will feel the difference pulling away from the quayside. It is that instantaneous. Now, to put it, the big question that everyone will be asking, well, Simon, this all sounds terribly exciting, and you've used some very long words, but how much does it cost? Well, that obviously depends on the number of props and the size of the props, but ranging from between £900 to £1,800 ex VAT. And so what we've seen is with a vessel who you'll be a vessel owner who you'll be speaking with soon, Dave Stevens of the Crystal Sea. He was seeing roughly a consistent 4% fuel saving immediately. In essence, you can pay off this entire product in under a month, simply in fuel savings. So, and so I'm not here saying use something with less poison because it's good for the fish. I'm not saying burn less fuel because it's good for the environment and the ozone layer. I'm saying this is just a really good idea for your business, and this will help you look after your crew, look after your families by just burning less fuel.
Yeah, but am I right in saying I take what you're saying and I appreciate it, because the first thing that turns me off is when people start saying that they're going to save the planet. That's me.
Yeah.
Good night and thank you. But am I right in saying yes, you're talking to them about the bottom line in their business,
Yeah.
but it's not harming the environment.
No.
Absolutely correct. It is not harming the environment. The product is completely inert. It has no metal ions in it. It has zero impact on the environment. So, Mark, do you want to speak to the safety
Yeah,
side?
sure. So, in terms of what we use polymers that are widely used actually in healthcare applications. So we put them on our bodies. They're very, very safe. They've got a very good, toxicity profile. But the main thing is it's biocide free. So that a lot of the products that you see on the shelf in the chandlery contain basically biocides. They're often a combination of something like copper or zinc and some very complex, long molecule that we call organic chemistry, but it sound very complex names. Bottom line is that's often a highly toxic material, and that's what we've avoided. So the philosophy behind this is one that I've had throughout my career. Actually, is I've innovated a lot of products, and they've always come with three kind of thoughts. The first is they've got to be an improvement on what's there. Uh, they've got to offer a benefit that the customer currently doesn't isn't able to access, and the final piece is that they've got to be affordable. And in this, we've tried to put that together, that it's a better product with new benefits that is very affordable. Because we know if it's easy to make. I think it was Mr. Honda said it's easy to make an expensive car, but it's very hard to make an affordable car. So we're trying to make a product that's affordable for
Yeah.
people to use, and that's why we focused on the propellers. It gives a big benefit for the amount of area you've got to coat, and it makes it far more affordable.
I should also say to another, because the product was originally, we were looking at the context of fouling prevention. And so some of the research that was done in Plymouth was around that, around sort of algal growth. But one of the things that we found that it was absolutely superb at was helping to prevent hard fouling. And of course, that's what's going to be most likely to do serious damage either to a hull or to a propeller. And not saying that necessarily it will be stationary for long enough for that to happen to some of these commercial vessels. But that's a really important consideration. And, also from a biosecurity aspect as well, because we appreciate a lot of these vessels may be operating within the aquaculture industry or in some of these areas that are slightly more sensitive. So anything that you can be doing to demonstrate that you're taking that into consideration, you're reducing the opportunities for invasive species to move from one area to another. It all helps. And I do want to make clear, I absolutely want to look after our seas. We absolutely want to look after the environment. But I go back to my point, to your point, to Wendy's research that she was doing. You don't need me coming up to you on the dockside telling you that you're doing everything wrong because you're killing the environment. That doesn't help the environment.
Yeah.
It doesn't help you as a boat owner. But if I can walk up to you on the dockside, and you may be at the end of your career, and you may have a 40-year-old vessel, and you're figuring out what to do, your investment profile on the, you're umming and ahhing over whether or not you're going to spend any money. But as long as we're not going to repair your propeller if it looks like Swiss cheese, but as long as it's in a decent enough nick and you coat it with this, you'll immediately be saving yourself money, and that's really kind of one of the headlines that we want people to take away from it.
Okay.
The other areas where we had interest was around shellfish. I'm thinking of the podcast that we're on, shellfish and shellfish beds. And we've had several discussions around, well, you don't want invasive species, so this coating is very good at helping prevent that. But equally, you don't want biocides because you don't want to be putting toxic material all over your shellfish bed. So that's the kind of discussion that we're always interested in, because it's a win all round. It's a win for the people harvesting the beds and the port authorities, and in the marine terms, it's a win as well. So that's what we're hoping we're offering people, a solution that maybe wasn't available before.
Yeah, but I also like the description, Simon, with the propeller like Swiss cheese.
Yes, we're not magicians, Jim. So, and I think it does go back to that tire analogy. If your tires are bald and flat, don't expect your vehicle to perform particularly well.
Yeah,
So
no, it's a,
there is a limit to
yeah,
predicting to.
I just wondered if the like Swiss cheese was holes in it.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah, no,
Could I? Was there a case when you saw a working vessel and you said this needs improving? Did that happen?
Well, we've talked already about the Crystal Sea, and David, the skipper, is fantastic. He's interested in new approaches, and we did his propeller back in August last year. And as Simon said, he's seen consistent benefits. But the other one was, we actually started on a different boat, which was called Two Brothers, and again, the skipper there, Mick, saw a benefit very, very quickly, and that was a smaller kind of day boat, based out of Painton. So we've very much taken the approach. We want to work with fishermen to understand the product performance, understand if it's meeting their requirements. So everything we do is led by the customer, so fishermen, and we'll continue to improve on our product because we want to give them the best that we can. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jim. I hope it does.
Yeah, no, it was interesting just to see how it all did something click.
Yeah, well, I think, and it goes back to that journey away from hulls to propellers, and living on an island in Guernsey, obviously surrounded by the sea. There's not really a sector of or a profile of individuals in the marine world that I would trust more to step onto a deck with than a local fisherman, because they know everything that's worth knowing about the sea. Typically, where who tends to be the coxswain on the lifeboat, who tends to go and skip a crew transfer vessels for wind farms. It's always the fisherman. Now, if we can cut our teeth in the fishing industry and help them out at the same time, that's the place to start. And so we were looking, that's to your point, looking at a boat and going, oh, I'll have a bit of that. It was looking at it as an industry, as a sector, and going, I think we could really help here. And I think
that's the crux of what I was getting at.
Exactly.
Was there a stage when you thought, look, we can help this, we can do something about this?
Absolutely. And because there's two, look, there's no point denying we're a business and we want to make money and make a living. But all of these things work really well when you can align the commercial interests of the two groups. And as Mark says, it's one of the key ones is making it affordable. So when you're looking at the numbers, the cost that it's costing an owner to put this on their vessel, we suspect they will probably make that back within 2 to 4 weeks. It was just a good business decision from our part to look at this industry and go, that makes absolute sense. They're high users of their vessel. They'll get a financial benefit incredibly quickly. They're the most trusted people when it comes to the marine world. And if I want a referral, or if I want to walk into any large propeller or engine manufacturer, and I can go in knowing I've got 1,000 or 2,000 skippers behind me out in the North Sea in the winter or wherever they may be fishing, I'd rather have them at my back than a bunch of leisure boat users, to be blunt. And I think that's a really, you can call it a sort of selfish perspective, if you will. But I think there's a very symbiotic relationship between what we're trying to achieve and the challenges that the fishing industry has at the moment.
I think the other thing is we have to thank A.D. Bartlett. We met some time ago, and we worked very closely with, because through him we really understood how important this could be for fishing. So there is a reason why we're quite passionate about getting this product into the fishing business, because we think it's the area where there'll be most benefit, real benefit for the end user. In the leisure market, it's a nice to have, and people pop along in the weekend and all the rest of it. Fishing, this is a serious business, and we thought we could make a real difference to something that's really very important.
Yeah, and I would say you probably have experienced this already. Your 1 or 2 or 3,000 fishermen that you talked about, there's one thing dealing with them. You know exactly what they mean and what they're saying. You don't have to ask them, what do you mean?
Yeah, I think we've certainly found that out. And you know what?
Which is
that's so refreshing compared
absolutely
to so many other, walks of life or industries that I've been involved in. Just say it how it is and get to the point. It makes for very efficient days because you speak to people and you don't end up on some, you made a joke about panels. Well, you're absolutely right, because a lot of other worlds, it's sort of meeting after meeting with no outcome. One of our most efficient meetings was held online, but the individual was in a pub at the time. Great.
yeah.
You've got to work with people where you find them, and it's very refreshing. It's a very refreshing industry to deal with, for sure.
Yeah. I'll give you an instance. One of my experiences very early on in my career, I was young at the time, and I had a fishing boat that I took his fish and sold it. And he was in with one of the harbours here. It's actually Wick was a thriving port at the time. He came into Wick. He was going to start landing, and I was trying to find a price for him. So kept ringing different people, get a price, see was he satisfied. And he came over after a couple of hours or so, and he says, "Are you getting any joy? Have you got a price for me?" I says, yeah, have a guy calling me back soon. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "Well, Jim, you know the score." He says, "Loyalty's extended to," this is going back to the 70s. He says, when the old currency, before decimalisation, he says, "Loyalty's extended to sixpence a stone." So it is stones. And I still laugh to myself thinking back, because if you were to relate that back into modern currency and the values, that's 50 pence a box. So that's 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 what he extended his loyalty. 50 pence.
Oh dear. But it's these things are reality of life is you know it, the rubber hits the road. Whatever analogy you want to use, we all have to look after our families, our businesses, our staff, our crew, our employees, in whatever walk of life you may be in. And so we can talk, and that's why, to be blunt, we could talk about all the wonderful, fluffy things, but we really just want to get down to those sorts of discussions and those sorts of numbers.
I think for me, Jim, just building on what Simon said, I'm very passionate about chemistry. I love it. I love science. But the thing that makes me most excited is when you can take it and do something meaningful in the real world. There's a lot of people that just like the science. For me, it's about making a difference in the real world. And I've done that 30 years in my career. And I always like working in a new area, and marine's an exciting new area. And I always want to bring something that hasn't been achievable before. And we really hope that that's what we're able to do.
And yeah, and when you say it was sort of like engineering to last, are we talking 3 hard fishing seasons or 10 marina summers?
Well, I think the best person to ask, Jim, is David on the Crystal Sea. He's had it on the prop since August, and I know that boat works hard. So that's
Oh,
our case
good.
study, if you like. And the same with two brothers. I mean, they've been working the boat hard. We're always
Excellent.
wanting to learn more. If there is a failure point, we want to know because we can always improve. But
Well,
we've got two good
well,
case studies there where those boats are out pretty
well,
long hours.
we're getting them on the show. We'll ask them.
There you go.
Yeah, but
Great.
to that point, what I should say is that the coating has typically been engineered for annual application, so it's an annual service item. We are working on developing others that will have a longer service item, and also that was the other reason as to why the focus on the fishing industry, because the focus needed to be on a vessel that would typically come out for some sort of annual maintenance. Because the one thing that we always get asked is, well, why are you not coating a cruise ship or a bulk carrier or anything like that? And they're going to dry dock every 2 to 5 years, and that's not the sort of space that we're in yet. The chemistry is much heavier and more demanding, and really with a lot of these things, and to Mark's point, one could play with the science and the chemistry for a very long time, or get that product out to market as soon as possible in an industry where we could access it relatively easily.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I mean, I guess to Simon's point, I think that there's a lot of requests from government and other people for solutions to decarbonisation, but I don't see many solutions. And I think, it's got to have a real benefit. And that's why we think reducing fuel, yes, that's a decarbonisation, but the important thing is it improves profit. At the end of the day, it's commercial operation. You have to improve the bottom line. So that's why, we're focused on that.
Good. And how does your coating stand up to like constant foot traffic, gear being dragged, pot slammed, hydraulic oil spills, and
so it's on the prop. We must say, don't put it on foot contact areas. The reason is it'll be like an ice rink, so it mustn't go on decks. It mustn't go near any footfall areas. The analogy that Simon and I often talk about is once it's coated, it's a bit like an air hockey table. anything that goes in contact with it will fly across it, and that's part of the reason for its performance. But so it's absolutely on the prop. It's absolutely not on the human walkways or work areas, and it's one of the reasons why in the application it's rollered or brushed on. It's not sprayed on, because if you have a workshop and you get it all over the floor, it's going to be extremely slippery. So we advise against spray application.
But to your point in terms of robust nature, the coating itself actually for relatively minor abrasions self heals. So
Yeah.
if you are, if the prop is coming into impact with something in the water, it has the ability to self heal and level over the top of it. And the performance of the coating is not going to be, if, for want of a better phrase, there was a failure of sorts, the coating is not going to drag down the performance of the prop or anything like that. So you're not, and I think this is one of the key points for the vessel owner is your level of risk on applying the coating to your propeller is incredibly low. As I say, it's the thickness of a human hair. You're measuring the weight, additional weight to your prop in grams. If for whatever reason you decided you didn't like it, you're not getting a grinder out to grind the product off. It's a simple solvent. You wipe it off, walk away. So there is incredibly low levels of risk associated with using it.
And what about a weld seams, and is that relevant?
Well, if you're putting it around, maybe around the prop on some of the stern gear, which you can do. One of the other things that we haven't talked about is we do have good results showing it inhibits corrosion. So that's something we haven't talked about yet, but it is a corrosion inhibitor. So the only caveat in one of the problems we haven't talked about with hulls is it depends what's on there already. So one of the challenges that Simon and I, when we first thought about hulls, was a lot of these paints are ablative, as they call it. They mean they're designed to come away. They continually erode. And if that's the case, then whatever you put over the top is going to disappear. So the only surface we can be absolutely definitively say it won't work on is an ablative marine paint. It will come away on that. But if it's bare metal or the original finish, it works very well. And you can use it in those scenarios.
So would they not get it painted? Would they not paint the hull then, and instead of that, you would
Again,
spray
this is
it?
one of the reasons why we think the propeller's a very good starting point, because we know most of those are hand finished. When they come out, they're polished in the yard to make them, as close to as good as new. And certainly with some of the stern gear, that is similarly. So a polished surface, a metal surface, is ideal for this. A surface that's very challenging, to be really honest, is where you've got multiple different types of paint on it. We wouldn't recommend the use of this product on that, because you don't know what's on there, you don't know how it performs, and unfortunately, paint is also a failure point. So it peels, it sheds. So very much this product's designed for new, clean, fresh, or bare metal surfaces.
You must have an eye out for doing something with the hull in the future.
We have some things in development, as Simon alluded to, and we're looking to extend the current product life further, because we know that would be a service benefit. And we have some other options in development, but at the moment, we're still very much focused on the propeller. But it's, to your point, Jim, it's not to say in the future, as the business expands, we won't have desires in other areas, including the hull.
Don't take offence, Mark, and it certainly won't be affected by our listeners. Won't be aware of it, but I think I got a better answer the answer you give me, I felt I got a better answer with a smile on Simon's face.
Go on. Mhm.
But it's amazing. My goodness, it's just something that could go on. It must be very exciting for you.
And that's actually one of the problems with it is we need to remain focused as a business on going to market with something that can offer the most amount of impact for the lowest cost with the easiest application. And the problem with the product is you want to coat everything with it. I want to coat the hull. I want to coat trim tabs. I want to coat windscreens. I want to coat everything on on the boat that's in constant contact with the seawater. But yes, all of them will have advantages to one or the other, or a marginal gain here or a marginal gain there. But yeah, the where we ended up was because we can use the least amount of products and at the cheapest price to give the maximum impact and benefit for the fishermen, and which is why we ended up where we are. But you're absolutely right. There is outside of the fishing industry is probably some easier user cases in terms of where one might be looking at putting it on hulls, on anything that wants to move through the water at high speed. But it all comes down to the cost, the barrier to entry because of that cost. And for some people, and in some industries, it's worth spending a lot of money to go an extra 5 knots faster. But they're not where our interest truly lies. The business was originally founded and the research was originally done by Mark to help reduce the impact on the environment and the sea. Frankly, coating someone's shiny speedboat, it's not doing an awful lot for that true mission. But working with the fishing industry, which is, and just to sort of maybe move on to another point, is that we know that there are regulations coming around those terrible terms of sustainability, net zero, emission reduction. Now, we're not saying that this is going to solve all of those, but for a very relatively low cost and easy application that fits into the annual maintenance cycle that the vessels will be undertaking anyway, the entire fishing industry could reduce their fuel consumption by about 5%, we think. And we think that's something that's worthwhile, and that's our mission. That's what we want to try and achieve.
Well, that could be substantial because, funny enough, just you're telling me that today. I've just been told today that a few of the ports around us in Scotland here, fuel costs have gone up anything from 20 to 30 pence a litre since the situation in the Middle East. So that makes it even more important that there's a saving.
It reminds me, Jim, I'm old enough to remember as a boy the fuel crisis in the 1970s, and I don't know if we're heading that way, but certainly saving fuel became a lot more important to everyone then, and I'm sure in the current situation it may well do again now.
Yeah, I'm just maybe on the wrong track with you, but I'm seeing, with the hull, because doing something with the hull as well, maybe in the future, because I know I'm sure, hey, I'm absolutely sure you've seen plenty of it. Maybe about Guernsey, water warmer than up here, it will be probably more so. But you get a boat that's maybe for one reason or another has been tied up in a harbour, small harbour, for a few weeks, and in the warmer weather, my goodness, the growth and there'll be it's almost taking it down. Never mind slowing it down.
It's back to things growing in your mouth and growing in the sea, and the only difference is, of course, in the marine world, that the side the sun's on, you get a lot more growth, whereas in your mouth, it's everywhere. So,
Yeah. Okay. And with your just say somebody a fishing boat wants it, is there lost time, prep time,
so
and
let's talk about the application. It's a three-part product. So there's a cleaning agent that you use to degrease the surface. There's a primer, and there are two top coats. And when we were doing Two Brothers, and also when we did Crystal Sea, we got all of that done in under a day. So really, the product's designed to fit in while you're doing other maintenance, painting the hull, servicing engines, getting the electronics sorted out. You can do this in the background. So I think it's a service item that's really designed to fit in around everything else that's going on the boat, and while you've got downtime while you're doing other things, including painting the hull or what have you. That's the time to get this on, and you can get it done in a relatively short time. So I think that's really the context for it. It's supposed to be fits in with the existing rather than adding a burden to the service schedule.
yeah, because obviously tying up in a shipyard, loss of fishing time is another big expense for them.
Time is money. No, we know, and you want to get it back
Yeah.
in as quick as you can. So this is very much in the background. I think the other things that go on the maintenance are far more time consuming, and this can be done in stages.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note as well is because, of course, there are other different types of products that you can use, but the second season application is just as fast, if not faster. There is no heavy prep required of grinding off a previous coating or anything like that. As long as the surface has been cleaned down well, then you can then recoat relatively easily. So you're not then going to, because you have coated it one year, feel the consequences of that in future years. It's still a very easy application year on year.
Uh-huh. And would there be certain times of the year that you could do it, or could it be winter? Does it
You can do it through.
weather?
You can do it throughout the year. All I'd say is that in winter the drying times are longer. They
Mhm.
approximately double. So once we're into spring and summer, the drying times are of a few hours per coat, which is fast. You just extend that time when you're in the winter season.
And would like a damp or cold weather compromise the job?
So you really want a dry area or a dry day. Wet weather conditions are not good because actually, especially the primer, will react with heavy rain. So you want a reasonable day or environment to do it in.
And would you say it's practical for a working boat in Scottish winter?
We haven't seen any limitations, I think, is the answer, Jim. We'll work
Uh-huh.
with everyone, and we know conditions are tough in the Scottish winter, but I'm sure with the right protection, it can be done.
Yeah, and if skippers operating on a tight margin, should they pay more up front, or what would you?
Well, I think to that, we've, to be honest, what one could have done is got carried away when deciding how much to charge, because what we're proposing is a product that's paid off within 2 to 4 weeks of the season. On those numbers, we could have doubled or tripled the cost that we're proposing, because even at that price, there's a very good reason as to why someone would do that over the course of a year. But for in the context of an annual refit, we believe this is going to be almost borderline close to a rounding error in terms of the costs to the working boat, depending on the size of it. It's not an inconsequential amount of money, but you will be paid back in your fuel consumption handsomely over the rest of the season until you're on the dockside again. And all I would say to your listeners is please do listen to the subsequent podcasts with the two skippers that have been using the product, because as far as I'm concerned in this industry, I'm just spouting words. They are meaningless until they come from someone that is experienced, that's been in that sort of weather that I haven't, who's had to maneuver their vessel in tight situations. That's who you should believe. Don't believe me and Mark. Wait until you've listened to them, hear what they have to say, and at that point, that's the point when you should truly make your decision. We're telling you the story. They're the ones that are prepared to put their name to it or not.
I get that point, Simon, but I think you're being unkind to yourself.
Well, possibly. Well, possibly, but you know, I say it simply because I respect the work that people in the industry do, and you know, we're talking about people's livelihoods, and I really do believe in and respect the faith that these skippers have put in us, because they didn't have to try it. We were sort of a couple of guys, and I know Mark's mentioned him, but I've got to say again, A.D. Bartlett really did put his neck out for us because he believed in what we were doing, and we wouldn't have had those opportunities to prove ourselves were it not for him and his faith. So a big thank you there. But you know, I really value the experience and the opinions of these guys. So you know, do absolutely do believe what we're saying, and hopefully they will dot the I's and cross the T's for people in those sort of more practical ways. The experience that they've had in terms of towing gear, how the vessel has reacted. They'll be able to use the right terminology that is probably foreign to me, but I think they'll put it across hopefully very well.
Well, I'll just come back at you another. I do feel that you're being sort of hard on yourself and unfair, because when you think of it, where would this be without you? Both of you.
I think, Jim, you know, what I'd say is it's been a journey. It's been 5 years. It's been a really challenging at times journey, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it comes with its highs. So, you know, one of the
Yep.
things that really knocked me out was I couldn't believe a propeller had the same effect as a hull. That was truly unexpected. When we got that result, you could have pushed me over. So I think, you know, it's part of life. We all have our journeys, and you know, it's not always a bed of roses. But I think the journey that Simon and I are on, we're enjoying, and we're enjoying working with the industry. There's some really
Hey,
wonderful people, you know,
you have.
and you
So
know,
I'm
sorry.
sorry I keep interrupting you, but let me ask you a question then, Mark. From what I've been listening to, hearing Simon saying, yes, you've every you're perfectly entitled to enjoy the journey as well. There's nothing in the rule book to tell you shouldn't. But here's a question for you, Mark. In that last few words from Simon, he mentioned one word twice: respect. Now, Here's a question for you. When did you last hear that word being used? We're in a war situation just now. We have our politics are in a shambles and all that's going on. When do you hear people using that word?
Well, I think it really comes up with people that are honest and are doing a good job. Like, I'll be honest with you. At the end
That's
of the
what.
day, it's people that are grafting, right? You know, I've had some really fun jobs when I was younger, grafting. And when you're working hard and you're grafting, you know what it is, and that's when you get respect. You get respect because of what you do, and
Uh,
you do it
Thank
well.
you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. You've answered my. You've answered the point that I've been trying to make.
uh,
So
yeah, and we talked about you talked about your son earlier, Jim. I've got a I've got a 4-year-old daughter and a soon to be 5-month old daughter, and you know, I think as parents, and only in the way that parents can, you sort of you look at those little faces, and it just picks you up and drives you to try and make that world a better place. And I know it's really fluffy thing to say, but that feeling of helping and looking after the environment, or fishermen, or people's livelihoods, whatever, it's just great. It's just great. I really do enjoy helping people, and I always find that it's good business to help people in the same way. You're going out looking for better pricing on the dock side. Um, for the majority of people, it gives them a really good feeling, and if we can make a livelihood and get that feeling at the same time, I think we're doing pretty bloody well, if we can do that. So, but yeah, I do appreciate your point around it.
totally, totally. And do you feel that say over 5 years the savings actually appear? You see the saving. That'll be the fishermen. They'll see it in their possibly in their fuel costs. And
Well, I think they'll see it in their fuel costs. From the work we've done already, they're seeing it in their fuel costs straight afterwards, and it translates over months. So that's what we want to bring. We want more fishermen to have that benefit.
Uh,
do you think it reduces the corrosion maintenance?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Jim, because one of the things we are looking at, and we're looking at it, we have some partners in the propeller world, and we're really interested in, does it reduce things like the cavitation damage? Does it reduce wear on the leading edge? So does it actually extend the service life of the propeller is a question we don't know the answer to, but we're definitely interested in understanding that.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
yeah,
But
just on
carry
that,
on.
I think there are definitely there's stuff we don't know, and at this time there's definitely stuff we don't know, if you know what I mean, because we're always learning, and some of these guys or girls may coat something that we never thought of. So we're always absolutely open to learning. But as Mark says, I think some of those natural anti-corrosive properties of it, we're confident we'll see other benefits to the prop as well.
Okay, okay. I mean, fishing is under scrutiny. Bring it, and are there chemicals in traditional coatings that may phase out?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, when you look at the regulations, there's definitely moves, and you can see it not just in Europe but in America as well, where there's questions over certain metal ions being used, and people wanting to phase things out, and you can see that because the first move is normally to ban it for leisure boats, but as night follows day, they then want to ban it on work vessels, and it becomes more and more problematic. So it would be nice if this technology enables us to be ahead of that regulatory curve, so that we have a solution before the problem of the ban or the restriction comes in. And I
To
think in
that,
other areas that's been missing.
yeah, and to
In
that point,
regulation.
Mark, do you want to just articulate how much of this product would be dangerous to a human?
So one of the main ingredients that we use has what's called a lethal dose 50 of 5,000 grams per kilogram. You'd have to drown in it. So that's how non-toxic it is.
Yes, it would squash you before you would you
Well,
would you would ingestion would be an issue. Not that we're
Yeah.
recommending to drink it. Please do not do that. That would.
you do not drink it, no.
No, no. Are you ahead of future regulation or playing catch up?
Well, I think we're ahead, and I tell you why, because we've taken really learnings from another area, which is healthcare, and we're putting it into the marine world. And in healthcare, these technologies are ahead of the regulations there. And healthcare, in its regulatory environment, I think is ahead of marine. So, to answer a long answer to your question is yes, we are ahead because we're removing the biocide, which removes the product from the biocide directive, which means that we're providing a product that works in a different way to the majority of products that are being used currently.
Uh-huh. Does your system reduce environmental risk in, let's say, a harbour or during maintenance?
Well, that's a really good point, Jim, because one of the things that is important is worker safety in maintenance yards. And obviously, if you have very toxic things, you have to have capture pits. So there's three aspects to this. One, it doesn't have a biocide, so it's inherently safer. Two, the amounts we're using, because it's the thickness of human hair, is about 16 times less than a traditional paint. So there's just less chemicals and material, full stop. And the other aspect is when you look at the health and safety data sheets, you need to take sensible precautions of eye protection and some skin protection, but it's not at the level of traditional products that require really quite heavy PPE requirements. So I think that really answers your question. It does make it, in our view, make things better in the working environment, and that is an important benefit.
And when you
One way to measure that is, what's the risk of sensitization? And we know a lot of the very much older products, there can be an issue with sensitization. So that's the type of thing that we hope will be a benefit to the whole industry, not just the people who go out on the trawler, but the people that actually apply it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what you'll find in harbours all over the world, in fact, is typically areas where washdown occurs frequently, areas where coatings have been applied historically. There is a buildup of product in sediment, and then that sediment becomes a hazardous waste, and then the cost of removing that, you're into the millions. So now, we're not in a place yet where we're talking about coating hulls. Obviously, in many ways, that's nirvana, but that sort of demonstrates what the environmental impact of these older biocide type products has had on the environment. It's all in that sediment. What issue is that? A big financial issue for the boatyard, or in some cases, it completely eliminates any possibility of further developing that area because you would disrupt that sediment, and you would either have to sort it out at the time, remove it beforehand, or you can't be redeveloping that particular area. So the risk to a harbour using this product is effectively as close to nil as you're going to get.
So there's been a lot of studies on sedimentation and longevity of the active, and I think that's probably one of the kind of sadder aspects is that you can have a very long life, longevity, some of these chemicals in the marine environment. So, one generation can leave a very bad problem for the next generation. And as Simon says, you disturb those sediments, you may not even know what's in them, and you can have quite bad effects. So, in that sense, that is an area that coincidentally we're pleased to be able to help mitigate. That's what we're looking to do.
And from what you've said yourselves, both of you, I mean, with commercial fishermen, they don't want greenwashing. They want practical compliance.
Yeah, 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 and this is just and that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? We don't want virtue signaling, we don't want greenwashing, we don't want any of that. We want to save you money, use less fuel. That's it. The test is at the pump, and that's it. That's where you'll see it, at the pump. That's where you should be looking. Keeping your data up to date. Most people know how much they're putting in frequently, and then see the befores and after, because that's where you feel it. So yeah, you're definitely not going to find any greenwashing here. That's for sure.
No, definitely. I'm certainly that's loud and clear. That message.
I might have given you that impression over the last hour or so, Jim. There was any doubt.
Yeah, I mean, putting it back in your lap, just say you had a boat. Is this worth the investment?
Absolutely.
We think it gives a very good return very quickly. So we'd say yes, absolutely, Jim. And we've tried to really focus this on being affordable, as we said earlier, and achievable. That's what we want. We affordable, achievable solution that just makes sense. That's what we're aiming for.
And I think one of the critical things here is it doesn't actually matter how old your boat is, because your hull condition is going to be the same as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow. But if you're coating your prop in the middle, it's going to go through the water better tomorrow than it did yesterday. So, and that's where it's so key to have that focus on the prop. And just going back to my comment around, investment cycles, and I'm also borrowing from the conversation that you had with Wendy, where a lot of people in the industry, you might be 50 years old. Do you want to be, or can you justify dropping tens of thousands of pounds of money on your vessel when you might not be 100% sure or not if it's going to deliver? What we believe is that this is priced to be very accessible to help people save money and the environment, tick that box, at whatever time they may be in that vessel's life, their lives, their careers, their investment cycle. We have people planning to put this on brand new vessels. You don't have to. You could put this on a 20-year-old vessel that's seen a lot, and I'm confident the following day you'll be feeling the difference.
In fact, you're going to be hearing from two vessel owners that they're not new boats. They're the ones we did. They've been sailing for some time, so they weren't brand new. Just part of the fleet.
I like your comments, your points about Wendy, Simon, but when you listen to her and all the fishermen, she did a huge lot of research. Been going around talking to fishermen, Ireland and around the UK. It'd be a brave man that would have argued with her.
It's really it was wonderful. It was wonderful research to listen to, and it really just sums up a lot of the problems around. I'm going to use the term eco warriors, and it's a very counterproductive way to approach these problems. It's patronizing. It shows a lack of business acumen and commercial reality. And the last thing that you want to know about after you could have had a hellish 6 days out at sea, is to come back and be told that, you know, you're not saving the polar bears when you have, frankly, much bigger problems. And so, and I think a lot of the some organisations need to try best as they can to reposition their messaging, how they're trying to communicate with people, because the net effect will be they will just put people off, and that will not help their mission. You have to work with people in the same way that Mark was saying. You've got to work with the environment and what's in your mouth. You've got to work with the industry and develop solutions with them that are, most importantly, and this is the words that I say all the time, they have to be economically sustainable before you can ever get to environmentally sustainable. It doesn't work economically, it's never going to happen.
100%. But I think one of the biggest, to me anyway, one of the biggest selling points, and I've maybe repeating myself, it's the two of yourselves. And if you ask me to how I mean it and how I would say it, it's yes, we heard all your background, chemists, and what you've come through. But what I like, what I like, and hear loud and clear is you're not trying to be men in white coats. You're not trying to be talking up there. It's like you're almost on the deck of a boat, speaking one to one, and you're keeping it simple. And to me, that's the number one quality in any walk of life. Doesn't matter where you're swinging a golf club or whatever you're doing in work, keep it simple. And
Yeah.
that's what I feel you're doing. You're not trying to smother it in big words or theories or thesis. Keeping it simple, and I think that's the loudest message. I
That's a
And
good
do
summary,
honestly.
Jim.
yeah,
That's exactly what we're trying to do. Keep it simple.
and I
Doesn't need to be
think
Yeah,
complex.
to the thing that I'd also maybe add to that, and that's also just generally brilliant advice in life. But I'd like to think that we're two relatively humble people, and I can definitely say that about Mark, because I know some of the things that he's achieved in his career that he's talked about. He's not mentioned any of them on this podcast. I know he's had an exceptional career and has been exceptionally good at the things that he's done, but that doesn't, none of it matters. You've got to be humble in what you're talking about. You've got to keep it simple. We're not here to try and show off or anything. It's try and keep it simple, communicate the things that are important, and leave your ego at the door, because nobody else cares about it. So I think it's always important to try and keep that ego in check, and just be humble and honest in the communication that you have with people.
Well, thank
Could
you, Simon. That was very kind. What I'd say is that I think, you know, it's how you serve others. I had a very good mentor early in my career, and he said the only question mark is how you can help serve other people and help them along. That's really a good thing in life.
yeah, if you're able to do that, rather than stand up in a soapbox and try to convince people that's all you're intending and trying to do, that's not realistic.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the biggest mistake commercial operators make of choosing a coating?
I don't think they make a mistake. I wouldn't criticize them. I think what's happened is the choice has been limited, and I think some of the and that's not for the wrong reason. It's just that products evolve and they start, and a traditional solution can work, but things, as we know in life, get outdated. So I think I wouldn't in any way criticize people. I think you can only use what's available, and I think what we're hoping is that we bring something new that brings new solutions. Because when you're restricted by your choice, you can't make any other choice. And I think you know operators always do their best. I mean, if you're running a business, you're always going to do the best you can because it's going to show on the bottom line. But unless someone steps in and gives you a better option, you're stuck with what you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the phrases that we use is that the product is a coating, not a paint. And I think Mark's absolutely right that it's an area of the marine world that has been in some ways neglected. They're very old solutions, old technologies that come out in some new branding. And we haven't seen really a sort of step change in technology in that space for probably decades. I think the options are currently limited. So we would just ask them to give something new a try, as long as they felt it was in their interest.
Could this could a boat buy an extra year before going to the shipyard?
No, we're not trying to extend the service interval, but we are trying to improve the service end result. I think that's probably, our aim here. So actually, we're trying to work with the boatyards. They're very important to us. We really appreciate what they do.
Okay, yeah.
And, I think it gives them an additional area that they can provide for. And propulsion is really important. It's a bit, some use the analogy of tires, but, we all know people that economize on their tires and things can end up quite badly for them. So the tire is the technology that holds the car to the road, and in a way the prop is just as important on a boat in getting it through the water really efficiently, and it shouldn't be neglected.
And in that yard time though, you do raise, of course, a very good point, because typically that fuel saving is coming from you're able to achieve the same speed that you usually go at, but at lower revs. So that's what's giving you your fuel saving. But fundamentally, you are running your engine less hard. So when we're talking about yard time, if it's possible to extend that service period of when you need to be undertaking maintenance as a result of running the vessel less hard, then that's where you could then start to see those savings as well.
If I could give you another example, when we were talking earlier about keeping it simple. I know I always really think that when I think about it, it's fascinating. It's 100% true. I had at a seafood restaurant up here in Scrabster for 20 years. And I spoke a lot when boats were in landing, guys have known 30, 40 years or more would be in, and obviously with me having the restaurant, they would talk about food, and quite a lot of skippers I discovered were really keen on cooking when they were home. They were a trip ashore. And they would be telling me, they would be looking at different recipe books and looking online and watching cooking programs, and they would be telling me some of the dishes they made when they were home, and it's really complicated. And I used to think it tickled me a bit because I was involved. I was part of, and well, I still am, and because they're such good organisations, chefs organisations. One London-based Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, and I would be down there at a meeting and talking to some of the best chefs in the country, possibly the world, Michelin stars, and oozing Michelin stars and all that. And I would say to them, okay, I would be explaining that would just say a fisherman had been telling me this complicated dish he made, just simply a piece of cod. And I would say, right, you've got this nice fresh piece of cod. What would you do with just landed, just the same as what this fisherman had. I says, it's just landed, it's really fresh. I says, what would you cook with it? Every one of them would say, oh, keep it simple.
Yeah.
So the talented chef, the skipper would be home trying to do something really complicated.
Yeah.
The talented chefs keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's kind of the philosophy in many ways. Like, we could overcomplicate this. We could try and go for the whole right now. There are a plethora of applications, but I think to keep it simple for the best impact is why we chose the path. And your ears will be burning tomorrow, Jim, as I repeat all over the island of Guernsey, keep it simple, to anyone that's going to listen to me.
But taking it a step that you've taken, another saying I think is as important as keep it simple. And when you're saying there about the prop and you're not into hills yet, baby steps.
Absolutely. That humility again of not trying to think we can do everything all at once. Baby steps, definitely. There's a lot of them in my house at the moment, so fortunately not at this time, but hopefully not anyway.
Hey, Mark.
What I would say, Jim, is it's scalable, so we can take it to other areas, but we've really focused on making sure this really works really well in this area. It's like a lot of things in life. You can do a lot of things, rush around madly, multitasking, but I'm very much let's focus on the one really important thing and do it well, and then we can move on to the next thing.
Absolutely. And there's another word that Simon's used now. It was respect and now humility. My goodness.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Jim. I'm just going to come across like a philosopher now, aren't I?
I think it's words that I think are so important. So no, don't take it. The last thing it needs is an apology.
Oh, very fine.
If just on the just going over it before we fold up, if it fails a lose fishing time, who would carry responsibility? Is that realistic?
Well, I don't think Simon kind of gave the answer. I mean, if this coating failed, basically you would end up with the original propeller. So it's going to be no worse than the boat without the coating, and that's why it's a low risk approach. You see, and that's why we think this is very low risk for people to try.
It's a fantastic project, which I'm sure you must be very excited about yourselves. You must be.
Well, we are, and there's one aspect I meant to talk about earlier, Jim, and I must apologise. I got to put into this podcast that it was designed and developed in the UK, and it's made in the UK. So this is a product that's come out of the UK, and these days it's important we celebrate that.
Well, I would add to the words that Simon used earlier. I'll put that one back to you, Mark, now. And how often do you hear that now? Made in the UK?
We need to hear it more often. That would be my answer, and that's why we're really pleased this is made in the UK, and I think that's a good thing.
My goodness, I mean, maybe I'm showing my age just now. You wouldn't pick up a set of cutlery to have a meal I can remember that days, and it would be made in Sheffield.
Sheffield.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that as well. So hopefully that's another positive direction that we're taking, and that again is the deliberate choice that Simon and I have made. But I think it's the right choice.
And that comes down
Absolutely.
to, again, that sustainability piece as well. It's not being manufactured in Timbuktu and shipped over here, or it's not well traveled. It's very light. It's made in the UK, low miles, good for the environment in that sense. So it's great to feel patriotic about it at the same time.
And it's
Well,
packed in aluminium, and there's a reason. We avoided plastic because you can recycle aluminium. That was a deliberate choice as well. Cost us a few pennies more, but it was worth every few pennies more because it's the right thing
but
to do.
would I be right in saying I hope I am, and I hope you're going to say yes? It would still have a quality mark to it, made in UK.
Well, I think so. I think there's a lot of things here that are very high quality. We think of everything from aerospace to racing cars. There's so many things in Britain we do really well. This is just another one, and we've got a very strong history in the UK of doing some great chemistry. Look at a lot of the drugs are made here that everyone relies on.
Yeah. Where can our listeners follow you online?
Well, at the moment, the best place to find us is on our website, www.assuredmarine.uk, and you'll be able to get in touch with us. There. We're also going to be at some industry events, the Skipper Expo in Aberdeen, and we'll also be speaking at Seaworks in Southampton this year. So one end of the different ends of the country for people.
But if you see us there, you want to have a talk to us about the coating, the APS coating, as we call it, please reach out to us. We're really up for a good discussion, and any interest is always good interest. So we'd welcome engagement.
We might meet up and put the coating glug glug glug.
Yeah, that's a very important coating, Jim. So we couldn't possibly neglect that.
I think that one might be made in Scotland, though, Jim. That particularly small
Well,
coating of whiskey.
that's funny. That's exactly what I was going to say, Mark. At least it would have the same. It would be made in the UK.
Well, it's a particularly fine product as well.
And low environmental impact, Jim. It's made up there as well. You can't forget the environment.
Oh dear, that's taking the tone down a bit. No, I totally agree with what you're saying there, Simon. As far as it's just, in fact, I'll tell you, with this restaurant project I had, we had the UK Seafood Restaurant of the Year award. We won it in London, and we won the UK Sustainable Restaurant of the Year in London. And it was based on the fact that I was using non-pressure stock species and, from sustainable stocks and all this. And one of the, I better maybe not say his name on the line, but the well-known chef, and he came up to me during the ceremony, and he says, what do you think of about this and sustainability situation? I says, it's the most abused word in the English language.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more.
Yeah. It's shallow words. But I would just like to fold up and thank you. I really wish you well, and tell our listeners to look out for Assured Marine. They're certainly going to be going places. So well done. I would just say to our listeners to like and subscribe. It would help the show. But otherwise, Thanks very much, both Mark and Simon.
Thank you, Jim, for inviting us.
Thank
It's
you
been a
very much.
pleasure.
Thank you, Jim.
Absolute pleasure.